Hey everybody, welcome to this edition of eChannel News. We've got a treat for you today. We've got Ivana Bartoletti, and if you don't know her, you're going to know a lot about her after this conversation. She's from Wipro, and she's a Chief Global Privacy Officer. And she's done a lot of stuff in obviously privacy and AI and all that stuff. And we're going to find out what should we be worried about, if anything, and what do we expect in this new era of AI. Ivana, welcome. How are you?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's great to be here with you.
All right, let's just jump into this. First of all, give me the background of Ivana. How did you get into where you are? And I know you wrote a book or so on the topic, so you know a lot more about this than I do. So how did this get started, and what's your expertise, and what's the book about?
Yeah, so I've always worked at the intersection between technology and the law and policy. That's always been my passion, and I actually started from privacy and information security across different organizations, from sort of the in the UK in the NHS, and then banks, and then media and entertainment, and now at Wipro. So focusing more on technology, and it's absolutely great. And so I started from privacy, and then what happened is that artificial intelligence became more and more popular. AI is certainly not a new thing; it's been around for a very long time. What has changed over recent time is the computational power and the access to data. Then now we collect a lot of information wherever we do, whatever we do. Our data is collected, whether it's browsing the internet, whether it's using the tube, the underground. There is data collection every point of what we do. So all this data plus this computational power have really brought AI to artificial intelligence to the new level. And what happened is that I realized that yes, there was an issue with privacy, that of course, but also I realized that artificial intelligence is far more than technology, because it uses data, it uses computational power. So there are things that need to be considered, for example, around bias, around fairness, and also the way that AI is transforming our society. So that's where I got to where I am. And my book, An Artificial Revolution on Power Politics and AI, is exactly about that link between technology, society, geopolitics, the global race to AI that everybody's talking about: US, China, BRICS, and Europe somewhere. And so that is, and in the book, I really talk about social aspect of artificial intelligence. So what is data? Why data is so important these days? But also issues around how artificial intelligence can code the world that we have today with its existing inequalities into software that makes decisions about tomorrow, allocates resources, decides whether you can have a mortgage or not. And of course, nothing around about this is neutral. And that is basically the topic around my book, and how we can make AI work for people.
Well, Yvonne, I'm just so happy and excited that there's a human that is actually looking at this and keeping an eye on this, because it is an important area, right? And like you said, we always struggle with privacy, right? And the social media has been around and took a lot of that privacy issues away from us, whether we liked it or not, whether we asked for it or not, whether we wanted it or not. And AI seems to be able to pull all the pieces together, where it would be a monumental task for a human, or basic algorithms, right, to get information about the human, right? AI is just going to make that, automated 10x faster, maybe even 1,000x faster. So with bad actors, it's pretty easy to leverage AI to get information that you need without a lot of resources, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, of course, AI it's got a lot of potential, right? I mean, we've got to
Sure.
recognize that, and I think it's really important to start from this, because there is a lot of potential, especially around healthcare, for example. It's really good to think that you can have medicine that is a bit more tailored to you.
Mhm.
I'm thinking about education, for example, and thinking about supporting, for example, children that they have learning difficulties. I mean, there is a lot of good that can be done with artificial intelligence, and
Mhm.
AI is not something so mythical that needs to be mystified. And a lot of it is about statistics. Um, and what changed over recent time is ChatGPT. And the fact that, and it's not just ChatGPT as a tool, ChatGPT is just one of the many. But what happened is that to an extent, these tools have come straight into our homes very quickly. So we were already used to AI, right? We already had Google Maps. I mean, we would be nowhere without Google Maps. I use it 20 times a day. But so AI powers that. AI powers our browsing activities, the recommendation systems that we see, all the adverts that we see that when we buy one Harry Potter, and then there is a recommendation telling us to buy the second Harry Potter. And then by the end of the month, you've already read Harry Potter, right? So it does raise issues around, for example, our autonomy and freedom of choice. But what is important is that with generative AI, which is sort of there are these tools that can generate images or text, then this happened very, very quickly. No, over recent weeks, everybody's been using these tools. They are accessible to students in schools. So basically reframing the discussion around what is education, because every student can access these tools. In work, because obviously you can use these tools for writing job descriptions, power chatbot. I mean, a lot of this can be done in a quicker way. And the risks have also been more present and more visible to people. And this has been really interesting over recent months, because I think people were seeing AI as something quite distant from them. And now we all see that AI is something that is accessible. 100 million people around the world use a tool like ChatGPT. This is huge. And it means that it's far more accessible to everybody. But of course, there are risks that come with it. The risk that you mentioned, Julian, is really important. And actually, to me, is the biggest risk around AI now, which is the fact that in 1 second, you can produce an image that is fake. And or you can produce and really and disseminate something that is not real. And therefore, you know, if you think, for example, elections, democracy, what is going to happen? You know, what is the risk that we're running where you can put an image of, I don't know, a president or a prime minister saying something which is not true, and you can put it out there, and the impact that this can have on the democratic viability of a country is quite risky. So now the world, in the entire world now is grappling with this, and they're saying, what are we going to do? And then of course people say politics runs behind the technology, which is partly true, partly not. But the issue
I would
is,
argue it's already there. I mean, we've seen,
yeah,
you know, how social media has impacted politics already.
of
We're
course,
sort of in the middle of this right now. I mean,
yeah.
just for the record, right? Both Ivana and I are actually not deep fakes. This is not an AI generated thing, and I think in the future we may have to do it. I mean, we actually created a little icon that we post in all of our content now that says "not AI created." Because I think that eventually, at the very least, I think the humans need to know, you know, is this AI generated or not? Because we don't know where that, you know, that narrative is going. But let's get back into this privacy issue, which I just feel we have no privacy already, and I believe that the younger generation has already given it up. They don't really care. Convenience trumps you know, privacy. That information is already there floating around. They've got umpteen pictures on Facebook and Instagram that I'm sure some smart AI is going to pull all that stuff together and paint a better picture of you than you would even know yourself, and so on. And without a doubt, I didn't want to, for me, I never spread fear. I mean, there's so much good that AI is going to bring to the world. And but maybe to start there, if you had a balance, Ivana, and on one end was the good part of AI, and the other end was the bad of AI, and you had these weights to put on the scale. Which one do you think is going to be the worst?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are very much deciding that as we speak.
Mm,
This is what makes this period in time so fascinating. I think whoever's got an interest in this topic, and I think everybody should right now, this is the time when we are discussing exactly different weight and what is going to prevail. And this is I always say this is a watershed moment
mm,
in the relationship between humanity and technology. It's happening now. And this makes the situation urgent, not in a dramatic way, not like the letter that Elon Musk and others wrote saying AI is going to lead us to catastrophe. That is actually making things worse because it's making AI looking at something more mythical and it's not. But the reality is that we are in this moment where we've got to decide the direction that we're going to take. And this is very, very important. And this is why people need to be involved in these discussions, and this is why we need to be able, and here I talk as a citizen, we need to be able to understand that AI is nothing complicated and actually impacts on everybody, and this is why we need to be involved in the discussions about its future. You mentioned privacy. Now, I'm not really sure that I agree that people have given up privacy. I think actually people don't have a choice. That is the main problem here. There's
Mm.
no choice, partly because, as you say, it's convenient. It's very convenient. I mean, it's nice to be able to share photos with your friends on the other side of the world. It's nice to be able to use Google Maps. It's nice to be able to have things delivered to you with Amazon Prime. I mean, everything is convenient and easy. However, we have no choice because if sometimes this sort of terms and conditions are very difficult to read, you're not going to navigate the internet every time reading 200 pages of a privacy notice. Similarly, where we live in a world where we're always connecting at any point, we're not going to go around with our phone, our gadget all the time, reading the terms and conditions and deciding whether we're going to do this or not. We don't have the time. And frankly, it shouldn't even be the responsibility of the individual, because you can't, it's a little bit like the pharmaceutical sector, right? You know, you don't read the ingredients of a drug before you consume it. You trust that somebody is actually checked that medicine that is good enough before it's put out in the market, right? So
But you do get the side effects.
we do get a side effect, yeah. But you get, you know, the issue is that the issue is the onus is very much on the individual, you know, to read everything, to make sure that the data is, so to an extent, this idea that we can control all our information is a little bit at odds with the world we live in now, with the fact that technology is everywhere, and also with the fact that there are large technology companies that have got a massive market power. So I think actually we are in this moment, and the world is doing things that in very different ways, obviously, but they're very similar. So the entire world is coming to terms with the power of big tech. Whether it's Europe, the antitrust in the US, whether it's Canada, whether it's Brazil, the entire world is saying, hey, how are we going to govern this? The second thing is the entire world is saying, okay, now we have LLMs, we have generative AI. How are we going to make sure that it's not going to damage people? And the third thing is when it comes to decisions that can have a long-lasting impact on us, for example, whether I can have a mortgage or not, whether I can access to education or not, whether I can be hired or not. In these cases, how are we going to make sure that these decisions made by machines are not going to damage individuals? And fourth or fifth, I can't remember. But anyway, we are deciding whether the fact that something is technologically possible means that we can actually really do it. So, for example, are we going to use AI in warfare? Are we going to have humans replaced in the decision of to kill someone or not? So this is the time where we're trying in different ways, but we're trying to set the rules. And this is why you have new legislation on privacy in India, a digital act in India. This is why you have the European AI Act in Europe. This is why you have a UK summit coming in a few weeks. This is why you have the FTC in the US, which is very strong on fairness in financial services and in more consumer AI. And this is why you have the AIDA legislation in Canada, which is being discussed. The entire world is grappling with the very same issue right now, because we are at this moment where we have to decide whether AI is going to work for us or not.
I'll play a little bit of a devil's advocate with you. So I do speak with a lot of AI people who develop the technologies and the pros and the goods and the cons, and I always try to weigh it, you know, how the good will do the bad type thing. And in reality, it seems to me it doesn't really matter, There'll be a lot of folks developing good stuff with AI, and there's going to be a lot of stuff developing bad stuff with AI. Um, in the past, we can do things like, for example, nuclear warheads, right? We knew who had the capability, who had the skill, who had the ability. So we could regulate that to some degree. We could stop it from any country getting it. We could do things to preempt that, right? Because that was a physical thing, and it was not everybody could build that stuff, right? Um, so whenever there's a problem in the world, and we could fix it, we were able to fix it, right? Because there were ways we can go in there physically and do it. Now we're talking about something that's completely virtual. We're talking about something that is any country, any person can access. So, and I just look at the analogy of hackers today, right? You could be uh, just a kid living with your grandmother in some country and actually generate millions of dollars in ransomware and create so much havoc. And the repercussions for you is near zero, if not negative zero, right? Negative. There is, and here we go. There's a way for a human to cause massive destruction with a computer they can buy for less than $500 or $1,000 from somewhere in the planet. And AI now actually allows that hacker to become 10x better because they don't even need to know how to, speak the language. And as a matter of fact, they can do it in, 50 languages if they want to, and they could social engineer the hell out of things and actually increase their success rate of ransomware and things like this. So if you look at that analogy that we're living with today as a sort of, I don't know, I want to say a precursor of them using AI, and then we figure, wow, we've got this cat out of the bag. It's everywhere. How do you regulate this globally? I mean, do we have a special SWAT team that is responsible for the globe that goes in there and shuts it down? It just seems that beyond the fact that the AI can be used to, decide who gets a mortgage, who gets a car, where you live, and all the bad things, by the way, that humans are doing right now, even without AI. Beyond that stuff, it just seems the bigger problems is that how do you canvas with such a global proliferation of this? And then we've got the bigger problems that people talk about is once military decides to use AI, which they already are using AI, drones is when you first saw drones and I first saw drones was like, what? What does that do? Now we've got like baby drones, right? That you can launch off of anywhere. And so it just seems like the world is sort of moving along without any guardrails, right? And here comes up ChatGPT and all the other flavors of it, who just decided, you know what? Let's just open the front door, right? Let's just see what happens without any guardrails. Now they're trying to put some guardrails up, right? But, for every guardrail that they've put up so far, I'll give you 10 people who figured out a way around the guardrail. And it seems like it's just a little bit too late, and I don't want to say we couldn't pull it back because that would be giving up. When you look at the severity, though, on a global scale of this problem, without a doubt, certain countries will nail this down and say, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. We do this right now with drugs. We do this right now with weapons. You can own a gun in certain countries. You can't own one in certain, there's lots of laws and regulations that governs the population of each individual country. But with AI, we're talking such a global thing. And I think we've seen that with a one human, AI can really do some interesting things, good and bad, right? What's your take on that?
I mean, I don't disagree that the challenges are there. I mean, 100%. Um, and I think it's interesting that you mentioned the analogy. I mean, you mentioned nuclear, right?
Yeah.
And it's an interesting comparison then, if you think about it, in the sense that nuclear is one area where the global cooperation and regulation has been crucial. I mean, think about the Iran deal, think about how much we've been working in the bad and in the good, to try and regulate access, use, controls. And in fact, but the analogy stops there in the sense that with nuclear, to an extent, as you correctly say, something physical, is something that we knew what the risks were, and something much more specific. The Atomic Agency was set up in a very different context. And I mentioned the Atomic Agency because a lot of people are saying that we need something similar at global level to navigate artificial intelligence. And although I do believe that we need an international organization, I do think that replicating something that we've done with nuclear cannot suffice with artificial intelligence because of exactly what you're saying. And also because of the supply chain. I mean, the supply chain element in AI is massive. And also because AI is not just about data, it's about software, but also AI is about industrial architecture. AI is about the wider geopolitical considerations. Think about microchips, think about all these issues that are creating massive geopolitical tensions across the globe. One other example of regulation, which I find a little bit more interesting, is, for example, the International Civil Aviation Organization, the ICAO. And that is an interesting one because that focuses on exports, right? So, for example, it says there are standards, each country has a body, and says, if you don't meet the standards, then you cannot market your product in here. You cannot, we don't accept it. For example, this happens with planes, this happens with this, and this has incentives for the companies that produce it, because of course it means that they do want to market to export in a specific country. But it also means that countries have got access to, is a non-nationalist approach, because it means that countries do have access to a lot of know-how, a lot of knowledge coming from other countries. So that is an approach that to me is much more interesting, and at the time when we're discussing sort of global governance. However, the world we live in is not an easy one, and we've got to bear, we have to bear this in mind. I mean, you have the Western world saying we need rules around AI because we need to safeguard human rights and we need to do this. You have massive geopolitical dimensions. For example, look at what happened with BRICS countries just a few days ago in their meeting in South Africa, when they opened up the BRICS to other countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia. And these BRICS countries are very different between them. But obviously, we are seeing a multipolar world that's very different from the world where the Atomic Agency was set up. So when it comes to the governance of AI, this is one of the most complicated things that we can possibly do right now. But it's perhaps an avenue that we must decide to embrace, because otherwise, I'm not sure how we're going to deal with this moving forward. And also, the national legislation, even as big as the European AI Act, they cannot be enough in a world where AI is so much supply chain and global supply chain involved, where there are so many different issues, where certainly data does not stop a border, nor does any AI tool is the product of so many components coming from so many different parts of the world. So that is one element. The other element is the role that companies can play in this, right? So, for example, yes, it is true that you can have the individual putting up an image or doing something, but the issue is that we've got to think about how, for example, we're going to watermark an image, how we're watermarking. So Google, for example, has recently come up with an idea how to watermark an image to say, yes, this image comes from, is AI and it's been watermarked. But also we need to think about how we're watermarking the data that goes into the AI, the transparency element. We need to be able to interrogate the AI tools that we're seeing and we're using. One of the big issues when ChatGPT and similar tools came out is they're not transparent. We don't know the data, where this data is coming from. When the Italian regulator said to ChatGPT, arrived and said, "Hey, stop for a moment. We need to know where the data is coming from." Everybody, reacted and say, "Oh, we want this tool," but you can't have everything, right? You can't have a safe tool to use, and on the other hand, want innovation. We have to do it. We've got these things have to go together. But I do think that you're correct that the issues that AI brings are far greater than the issues around nuclear, or the issues around equipment, or there's much more involved. And this is why it's good to see politicians, I think, coming to terms with this, understanding the issues. If you think about when Mark Zuckerberg went to Congress a few years ago, when he was asked, well, Zuckerberg, how do you make money? And that was another, it looks like a long time ago in terms of understanding around all of this. But I think that regardless, despite all the difference between countries, I think there is an alignment on main issues. We know that there has to be transparency, that actors will be there, but the issue is how we can converge on some tenet of democratic use of AI, which is really around transparency, watermarking, the human oversight, the ability to interrogate these systems. And yes, we will have lots of issues, including, for example, copyright and intellectual property, where using a definition of intellectual property that may be outdated. Because AI, data is a little bit more about sound, right? So it's the aggregation of data that matters, not just the individual part of it. But I think we are going to have to really put our heads together in understanding how we are going to isolate the bad actors by creating that governance that we need. And it's not going to be an easy task. But governance comes on many layers, right? It comes on, there's government, there is international organizations, there is the role of businesses. Businesses have got a big part here as well, huge part in producing, vetting their tools before the tools go out in the market. And also there is a role of civic society. Civic society has an enormous role to play here, because there is no doubt that there is an issue of democratic accountability. And civic society, and this is where your role, the role of the media, becomes very important in explaining what these tools are to people, explaining that an artificial intelligence tool is far more than a technological tool, is a bundle of parameters, data, and people. And therefore, all of this is way beyond the technology, because we also need to empower civic society to really push the boundaries and ask for transparency, ask for all the things that needs to be asked for. It's a little bit like the 30s, in my view, like when people were brought from the farms to the industries, to the factories, and it took a long time from the workers to get their rights, And I think this is the time where we've got to do the other way around. We need to empower civic society to have their rights and demand their rights on a very big speed. Because one thing that we all agree, I think, around the world, regardless of anything, is that we have let the digital ecosystem run a little bit too wild. And now we're coming to terms with it, and we're trying to rein them in. And that is where we're late. That is where
ask for forgiveness.
Yes, exactly.
I'm first of all, I'm going to be betting on you, Ivana, and I hope that your mission succeeds in getting all these people in the world to think differently about this, because that is the right way to do this. My fear is that we're against an uphill battle, and when I look at what's there already, it's quite an unfair advantage in just about every other industry we can think about. There was never an unfair advantage by the dark side. Point drugs, yes, there's lots of bad cartels out there doing stuff and whatever, but we have agencies who could clamp them down when we needed to, and that type of stuff. Organized crime, as big as they are, they don't go bigger, outside of a limit, because they can reel them back in. So all of these nefarious type of situations, which continue to exist today, by the way, in the world, as we all know, there were always ways to put guardrails around them to keep them from, let's say, James Bond movies, global domination and controlling the planet and making us all whatever. Um, for me, it's AI is literally one thing. It's taking free will away from people, because when I look at AI and all the great things it does, we use it. Um, it really allows a human to do 10x more, right? But then what it's doing everywhere else, it's sort of like doing the stuff for us, the work for us. And the people talk, well, the smart people think that we need to fight AI with AI. And for me, that's like a never-ending race, right? So once you put AI to start putting guardrails on AI, who's putting the guardrails on the AI, who's putting the guardrails on the other AI, and you can go down this rabbit hole, because this thing is a thing that you cannot see, right? Um, for example, we used to think, or we've got these big data centers, and from space you could see them pulling data with a heat, signature. So if you're doing a lot of AI stuff, computation, you've got this, you could see them from space, from a data center. Well, now, the computers are getting much better. So they don't use that much power and so on. So there you go. We really can't really look at that. So all these ways for us to identify where AI is and where it lives is sort of seems to be getting invisible. So it's becoming like our oxygen, it's everywhere. We're breathing it in, we're using it every day. And at some point, we can't live with it, we can't live without it, right? Because how do you fight what's going on with AI without AI helping? And again, I use the same analogy with the cybersecurity industry. You cannot fight cybercrime without AI today. It's
100%.
impossible, right? And what does that mean? At the end of the day, human normally is looking at all the bad things happening on the screen. What AI does, it removes all those bad things, takes care of it for you. So you look at the bad, the worst things. And then once you identify those worst things, AI learns and that removes that from your workload. So what's happening is we are obviously teaching AI the depths of how humans are reacting to certain activities and whatever. And as that continues to happen on a massive scale, right? This is happening all day, all night. AI is taking over more and more of those responsibilities, taking away more from, the biggest thing we always talk about in the industry, in the IT industry, is that, wait, AI is going to remove all the mundane work so you can focus on the things that, it's important and fulfilling and exciting and so on. And, yeah, I agree. But what happens if that's just like 10 minutes a day that's left
Yeah.
for me to do?
And funnily enough, that is not even true, is it, Julian? I mean,
No, we're working
over
harder.
recent
We're doing more.
no, but also over recent times, AI seems to replace not the repetitive task, but actually, I mean, Hollywood actors are on strike. Is the journalist,
Exactly.
is the sort of so-called, in a way that of course I don't like, but it's so-called cool professions that seems to be the one at risk. So and that is interesting from another perspective in my view, which is the dynamics of the impact on AI on society is rather unpredictable, right? Because it's not like the most manual jobs that would be replaced here. What we're talking about is the journalist. Like, is the
We have to
is
yell the message. We're
yes, I
the
mean,
we're the
it,
megaphones, right?
it's a really interesting one. So it's very difficult, I think, to predict in terms of social policy, like what is the impact? Because we knew it was the shop floor that was impacted with industrial revolution, but now it's a different one. Now it's as I said, it's the Hollywood actors are like, oh, with the scripts, it's the jobs that were considered sort of white collar jobs. I mean, it's a really interesting scenario that is opening up. I do believe though that a lot of AI that is marketed as AI is very much not AI. I do believe that there is a lot of glamour. I do believe that there is a lot of noise. I do believe that a lot of AI that is marketed as AI is statistics. Is what I try to say is that we need to be able to, I think, look a little bit beyond the hype, um, and and I think there is a responsibilities that companies have to make sure that um, they explain exactly what they're producing. They can sort of what they're doing, and also they're able to say this is what AI, this is what it isn't. So because we live in a complete hype at the moment, which I understand, but it is a
Oh,
hype at
of
the
course,
moment.
it's a scale, right?
It's a
You've
scale.
got real AI to the far right, right, and not left or right in politics. Just it's really way over here, and
Yeah.
that stuff is really pushing the boundaries, right? And as things like quantum computing and so on takes that to the next level, who knows where that's going to go? But in general, everybody's using intelligence, right, to sort of make it happen. It's our community are the organizations in the world who are peddling AI to all businesses and governments and so on to leverage it in their daily work and so on. And of course, the vendors who are creating and leveraging AI in their technologies and so on. So we're sort of in this little thunderstorm of activity. And in any given day, you hear one story. Oh my God, this is so fantastic! What an amazing use of AI. And the next story, yeah, well, that doesn't seem well. And one example that actually bothers me, and we'll wrap up soon, but it's the fact that AI is now able, and the U.S. government came out and said this very clearly. It's impossible today for us to determine what is real and what is not real from a cyber attack. So, an information you're receiving from an email and so on, it is no longer we no longer able to know which is real and which is not real. And we're not even talking deep fakes yet. We're not even talking voice, those types of things. And so it seems that the line has caught up. It used to be very easy. You could see the prince from Nigeria as an email with 40,000, send me this check. And that was easy to identify. And now we've gone from those days to unidentifiable, which means humans who are every day have to go to work and work in the government have to determine, wow, that looks pretty real to me. Do I click on it? Do I not? That type of thing. And the organizations who are developing the technologies to educate the humans about what to click on, what not to click on, giving them pen testing and so on so they can understand this. They're telling me in the back end that it looks like the humans still continues to be the weakest link. And there's only so much we can do. And as of today, 2023, in September, we are still the most hacks that's penetrating the organizations and government all over the world is the human, weakness, right? Clicking on something not supposed to. And so it's not getting any really better, right? It just gets a little bit more complicated. So I just hope that AI doesn't keep pushing us. We feel we got it now. Oh my goodness, we didn't see that coming. We got to go a little bit more. We always got to keep going and going. So I hope that you succeed in pulling it back in, putting up real guardrails. I'll leave you with one last question. Ivana, what's your outlook? What do you think is going to happen short term? Let's say the next year or two.
But I think the next year will be the year where we'll see how much we can put the guardrails that we need, right? The next few months will be quite crucial in the sense that you have the European AI Act, which will be approved hopefully by the end of the year. We'll have to see how much this interinstitutional dialogue is going to change the existing legislation. But I mentioned the European AI Act because of sort of Europe has always been this sort of setter in terms of regulation. And whether the European AI Act will have the same impact that the GDPR has, I'm a little bit more dubious, but in reality, it is the first kind of product-based legislation based on risks out there. There are discussions about laws around AI globally. There is a UK summit in November where countries from Canada, the US, and Europe will be there. And to discuss exactly this topic. There is another plethora of legislation that is actually impacting, for example, in around antitrust, around an intersection between privacy and competition, which are all very much related to this. So I think what is going to happen is that we're going to have a heated discussions around governance. We're going to have a heated discussion about the role of private companies and the big tech in defining this governance, and whether they should be at the table, how much they should be at the table, deciding the rules around AI. We're going to spend the next few months, there's going to be a lot of this. Meanwhile, we're going to see companies more and more having the private instance of generative AI tools, more and more using these tools in a way which will be and trying to develop more and more use cases on how they can, in different areas of their business, how can use these tools to innovate, and we were going to continue to have announcements from time to time, every 2 weeks maybe, about a new product, a new ChatGPT, a new Llama, a new product coming up. So I predict the next few months there'll be a lot of discussions about this, and I think these are the months where we will have to see more and more people involved in these discussions. It would be good where businesses will have to really step up, because there will be probably more attention coming to the public, and I imagine businesses will have to be held more accountable about their role, their governance practices, and I imagine that the role of the media will be very important in the next few months in really being able to cut through the hype. And I always say to journalists, it's really important to cut through the hype, because we need to explain to people what really AI is, what is not, what is capable of doing, what are the risks, what is the role that people can play. So I think the discussions will be quite heated over the next few months.
Well, we'll do our part with the 100,000 companies who are in the middle of the buying and selling of AI and technologies and so on, and helping to figure out what they're doing right and wrong, and helping them figure out how to do the right thing as well. And we'll be following you, and I'm sure I would love to have more conversations. We could speak for hours on this topic, but please ensure that we are updated. We should have regular conversations about what's happening, what happened at these summits and so on, so we can then bring that message to the channel community that we work with, and maybe they could then share with their millions of customers, and hopefully that's going to bring some kind of an impact. My fear is we don't go along down the lines of my only fear, because we're embracing this no matter what, is that we don't get into the same situation we are with climate change. Yeah. I look at the climate change and AI as two of the biggest threats on the planet. One is going to certainly kill us eventually, and the other one may kill us by 1,000 cuts a little bit before. But in reality, it is not easy to get the whole globe to come together on issues that affect everybody on planet Earth. And I think AI is one of those things that it does that. And so if we can leverage what we've done right and wrong with climate change and those things that has happened, maybe we can actually implement some better guardrails. If anything else, and if nothing, at least slow it down until us humans can speed up our brains and catch up to this stuff. And I'm hoping that some smart human out there is going to figure out a way to pull the plug if we need to, and stop AI from proliferating. But we shall see. Ivana, it's such a pleasure speaking with you, and what a wealth of information. I will learn a lot more about what you're doing and keep following, and invite you to keep the conversation going to educate from our world the companies who are buying and selling and developing this technology. So thank you very much, and all the best.
Thank you to you. My pleasure.